Hello everybody. We're going to look at the notes and practice questions from your Learning in Place packet, the second Learning in Place packet on page number 1 where it says SOL 4.2 A through B and 4.3D notes and practice. We're going to look at these first 3 example problems. So the first one says order these numbers from least to greatest. I know it shows you the answers, but I'm going to show you how to get there so that you can do the practice at the bottom by yourself. So the first one, they're all 4 mixed numbers. The first one is 3 2/8. The second one is 3 2/5. The third one is 3 1/10. And the fourth one is 3 3/4. So the first thing we're going to do is transfer these to a larger area. You can use any paper you have at your house, a notebook, anything you can find. I'm going to use the whiteboard so that I have a little bit more room to show you. So 3 2/8, 3 2/5, 3 1/10, and 3 3/4. So let's review our comparing and ordering fraction strategies. So here are 5 strategies you've learned this year. So the first one we could do is look at our numerators, and then if they're the same, you can compare the numerators. We can look at the denominators. If they're the same, you can compare the denominators. You can compare the fractions to 1/2. You can compare the fractions to 1 whole. Or you can find the equivalent fractions by finding a common denominator. Looking at these mixed numbers, I know each one of these has 3 wholes and then a smaller fraction. None of my denominators are the same, but I do have 2 with the same numerator. Since I'm comparing 4 different mixed numbers, I'm just going to go ahead and use strategy number 5, finding equivalent fractions by finding a common denominator. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at these and look at my denominators. I have an 8, 5, 10, and 4. The first step to finding a common denominator is to find your least common multiple of your denominators. So I'm going to write them in order from smallest to greatest. So I have 4, 5, 8, and 10. And then I'm going to list my multiples until I find the smallest one that they have in common. With 10, I'm going to go ahead and do that one first because that one's probably the easiest one for you to do, 10 and 5. So 10, 20, 30, 40. Now I'm going to go up to the 5s. I'm going to do these, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Now I can do my 4s. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40. Notice how I do have a 40 in all of them so far and a 20. My 8s, 8, 16, 24, so it's not going to be 20, 32, 40. I have a 40 in my list of all these multiples. So my least common denominator is going to be 40. Now I need to set up my new fractions. So I'm going to move this up a little bit. I'm going to use a new board now. For 3 2/8, my new denominator is going to be 40. So I'm going to carry over my 3. I'm going to set it up with the denominator of 40. I'm going to set up all my fractions first, and then I'm going to go back and figure out how I get to 40. 3 2/5 equals 3 and a new fraction with a denominator of 40. So again, we're just finding equivalent fractions. All right, so let's look at this first one. So 3 and 2/8. So I'm going to look at how I go from 8 to 40. Remember, when you are finding equivalent fractions, what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top, or vice versa. What you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. You can only multiply or divide to find an equivalent fraction. In this case, our denominator has gone up, so we'll be multiplying. Whatever we multiply the denominator by, we must multiply the numerator by. You can use your multiples list to help you. So your first thing is to think, how do I go from 8 to 40? Well, 8 times 5 equals 40. So I must do the same thing to the top. 2 times 5 equals 10. So now I have 3 and 10/40. Looking at the second one, how do I go from 5 to 40? Well, 5 times 8 equals 40. So I have to do the same thing to the numerator. So 2 times 8 equals 16. I come down to the next one. How do I go from 10 to 40? Well, 10 times 4 equals 40. 1 times 4 equals 4. And then my last one, to go from 4 to 40, 4 times 10 equals 40. So I must do 3 times 10, which equals 30. Now I have 3 and 10/40, 3 and 16/40, 3 and 4/40, 3 and 30/40. Now I can put these fractions in order from least to greatest because my denominator is all the same. When your denominator is the same, your piece sizes are the same. So your numerator tells you what is the smallest and what's the greatest. All your pieces are the same size. So I'm going to rewrite these just so we can look at them. And then we're going to go back and we're going to write them in order from least to greatest. So my first one was 3 and 10/40. Then I had 3 and 16/40. Then 3 and 4/40. And 3 and 30/40. So it looks like this. Remember, we're going from least to greatest. So since my pieces are all the same size, my numerator now tells me how many of each piece that I have. So my smallest one is 4/40. So 3 and 4/40 is going to be my smallest fraction. I'm going to go ahead and cross that off my list. My next one, look at your numerators, will be 3 and 10/40. I'm going to cross that off my list. Your third one is 3 and 16/40. I can cross that off my list. And your greatest is 3 and 30/40. Now there's one more step. All you have to do is go back and fill in your equivalent fraction. So remember, we used this strategy. We found equivalent fractions. These are the exact same size. So we just go back and put in our original. So 3 and 4/40 right here was equivalent to 3 and 1/10. So I'm going to write that right below it. 3 and 1/10. 3 and 10/40 was equivalent to 3 and 2/8. 3 and 16/40 was equivalent to 3 and 2/5. And 3 and 30/40 was equivalent to 3 and 3/4. So in order from least to greatest, we have 3 and 1/10, 3 and 2/8, 3 and 2/5, 3 and 3/4. And that is our final answer.